God, can you imagine if Osmosis Jones all happened inside of Nicolas Cage instead of all inside of Bill Murray?
I was nauseated by that egg I ate at the zoo.
Out of the monkey's mouth.
Out of the monkey's mouth. All right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Backstage Gaming, dramatic takes on your favorite games. I'm Chris.
And I'm Dylan.
And we're having to do another morning record because that's the state our lives are in, and boy howdy, we're loopy.
Oh yeah, I hope all of that intro dialogue makes it in.
We're gonna have a 20-minute intro to this episode because I'm a monster of an editor. Welcome back to our podcast. We talk about games and how games tell stories because we tell stories with our bodies and our voices because we're actors. And
oh man, AM Chris is the best Chris.
AM Chris is tied with like early AM Chris for weirdest Chris you can get. But today we have a topic that is going to be kind of a fun one. There's a narrative tool that comes up somewhat frequently in games that games are able to make kind of a unique use of by virtue of, you know, their interactive media, and you literally, you know, walk a mile in the character you're playing as shoes. So we're going to talk about what happens when sometimes who that character is changes on you without you fucking Dylan in real time editing our note document while I'm watching with all caps and profanity. But we're going to talk about
I didn't think you were still on the dock.
We're going to be talking about games that change the player character perspective kind of out of nowhere, and the effect that can have on a narrative and the effect that can have on the way that you as a player experience a story. I was doing the recording session for the other podcast last night, and one of the other actors was kind of late, and so we were just chatting. I don't know how it came up, but somehow the topic went from one of the other actors involved was going to, after they were done recording, they were going to go see Us for the third time. And so we were talking about horror movies, and then that turned into talking about movies more generally, and then somehow that turned into a deep dive on Osmosis Jones.
Okay, of course, naturally.
Oh, it was because it was a weird train of thought. This actor, their girlfriend's friend, one of their girlfriend's friends, had begun the community of Lorax fans that ship the Wunsler with himself.
We found ground zero.
And then that led to a discussion of how people were really horny for the virus voiced by Lawrence Fishburne that was the villain in Osmosis Jones.
Oh my god.
And then that led to
I can see why, but
and then that led to a deep dive on just like, wow, Osmosis Jones was a weird and kind of great movie with a like bizarrely star-studded cast.
Yeah.
And then I cracked the joke of like, hey everyone, welcome to our Osmosis Jones fan cast. And then I was just like, Jonesin, that's the name.
And that's why I agreed to marry you.
Yeah. Oh my god. Dylan, tell me about our topic for this week.
Okay, so on the docket we have unexpected perspective shifts. Essentially
followed up by a bunch of game names, and then what made me laugh a minute ago, all caps, fuck, I forgot The Last of Us.
Exactly. So basically, as the player, you become accustomed. You are introduced to your avatar. The avatar may be someone that you create, or it may be a character that is given to you. But for all intents and purposes, whether you like the character or not, you start to project onto that character, and a lot of who you are as the player and what you are doing in this fictional universe crafted for you to play in is informed by what your protagonist does and the decisions they make. Yeah, and there are some games where the rug is completely taken out from under you and you find yourself playing as someone completely different.
We've talked before on this show about how acting is all about characters making choices. And so with that being the case, you make choices through the character that you are playing, your avatar in the game world, and that's what makes the game go forward. And so it's very interesting when suddenly it's like, nope, you're this guy now. Dylan, do you have a good example to just sort of like kick this can into my mouth?
Okay, like I want to, but then we'll spoil all the discussion. No, okay. So I think one of the most famous or infamous, if you're feeling nasty, examples of this happening. This is the AM cast just the Horny cast?
It might be.
But anyway, the most infamous example of this.
Gamers and gamettes.
God damn it. And I'm adding to the docket. Anyway, I think the most infamous example of this happening is Metal Gear Solid 2, where in all of the trailers and press releases leading up to the release of Metal Gear Solid 2 was that you would be playing as it's the continued adventures of MGS1 protagonist Solid Snake. Yes, that is his codename. And
he's dummy thick.
And god damn it. Anywho, there was this built-up expectation that this was going to continue Solid Snake's story, and then you play as Snake for maybe 2 or 3 hours, and all these weird plot twists happen like one after the other, and then it looks like Snake drowns, and then you start up the game as someone else. You are replaced from Snake with the protagonist Raiden, who is basically like he is. If Snake is introduced to most American fans of the series as this very gruff, gritty, hardened soldier who's already seen a couple missions in his time, Raiden is completely green, completely fresh, and all of the weird supernatural stuff that happens in the Metal Gear games are completely alien to him, and he reacts to them as a normal person would. A lot of people didn't take well to that, but essentially what is being accomplished in this is that Hideo Kojima is trying to take something that we have taken for granted, and that is the weird supernatural bullshit that is the Metal Gear Solid universe, in trying to reframe it as something alien and foreign, and something that really you should be questioning because it's not supposed to make sense.
A common one is what you see, like you're saying, kind of in the sequel situation of oops, surprise, new character. But I think that it's interesting, what I like about Metal Gear Solid 2 and what I like about this sort of switch with Raiden is that it is very intentional. Like you're saying, it doesn't really change much about the world, but it asks you to see the world through the eyes of someone who isn't quite as desensitized to all of this stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's a common thread is as actors, we're always trying to be intentional about the decisions we make. And so we're on this podcast going to try and be very intentional about what do you think this is for? Because rarely is anything like this just, for the shits of it.
It's not just I'm doing this because I'm creative and I go against the grain. Hideo Kojima, I mean, I'm quirky describes Hideo Kojima pretty well, but I do think that at least in Metal Gear Solid 2, a lot of his quirkiness had purpose behind it.
Yeah.
I could talk more in depth about Metal Gear Solid 2, but I feel like that deserves its own episode. The Brecht episode that we've talked about a couple times.
Yeah.
But don't worry about that right now. Who's Brecht? Shut up.
Bertolt.
But
Another good example from slightly more recently than Metal Gear Solid 2, although also kind of an older game at this point, was Assassin's Creed 3. The Assassin's Creed franchise is very weird. But is built.
Is it?
Yeah, but it the core conceit, at least of the early games. I don't know if they've strayed too far away from this or not. I haven't really played much Assassin's Creed after Black Flag, but the core conceit is that you play in the first 3 games as a boring future man named Desmond Miles, I think, who's voiced by Nolan Nurth.
Nolan Nurth.
Nolan Nurth.
He's your everyman, and by that I mean he doesn't really have much of a personality and just kind of reacts to things going around him, but
Desmond Miles does, not Nolan North. I have not met the man. I assume he's more interesting than that.
Nolan North, at least from interviews, seems like a ball of charisma.
Yeah. But anyway, so you are a boring man in the near future. I guess actually it was set in 2012.
What?
Yeah. That was a flashback, but the conceit of Assassin's Creed 1, 2, and 3 is that you're counting down to the supposed end of the world, Mayan apocalypse, December 21st, 2012 bullshit.
Oh man,
I killed
that's
Dylan with that.
aged really well. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna say.
Anyway,
I can't believe Ubisoft
I need to find
future.
the thread. I need to find the thread.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. We're really bad at this.
But you, boring man in the distant future age of 2011, can plug yourself into a machine that lets you live through the lives of your ancestors. All of your ancestors being much more interesting, stabby fellows of the past in an ancient order of assassins. It gets real goofy. There's this whole, like, Illuminati-esque secret war between the assassins and the Knights Templar, and, like,
Don't forget the ancient aliens.
Yeah, there's also ancient... It gets weird.
It gets really weird, but anyway.
This is important because they establish, like, Assassin's Creed 1, you play as an assassin in the Middle East during the Crusades. Assassin's Creed 2, you play as an assassin in the Italian Renaissance, and so they're building this expectation of, like, every game you're going to play as a different fellow in a different historical era, and you're going to be an assassin.
Yeah.
And then Assassin's Creed 3 starts getting promos, and you're seeing a man in, like, the assassin coded clothing with, like, a tomahawk and his hidden arm knife, and he's, like, running through battlefields in the Revolutionary War. And so it's going to be set in America. You're going to be able to, like, do your runny jumpy climby that is so core to the game outside. They're teasing these big battles, and it's like, oh sweet, Revolutionary War, Native American man assassin. And then you buy the game, and the first, like, 4 hours you're not playing as Connor, the promised Native American assassin. You're actually playing as a stuffy British
Hemingway
man
or something like that.
I can't remember his name offhand.
I'll look it up, but keep talking.
Yeah, you're playing as this, like, stuffy British man who the twist is, and spoilers, I guess, for the end of the intro to Assassin's Creed 3.
Arguably the worst Assassin's Creed game.
Yeah.
I said arguably. Like, there are better Assassin's Creed games. It's not a terrible game, but
there are much better Assassin's Creed games. But the twist is that you find out that this guy is the father of the character you're going to be playing, and this guy is a Templar. And this is, like, again, it's intentional. They're setting up, like, he ends up being one of the main conflict points and one of the main villains of the rest of the game. So what they're trying to do is they're sitting here trying to make you, like, appreciate that maybe there's some nuance on, like, the Templar assassin evil good conflict going on here.
Hatham, that's his name.
Hatham, thank you, yes. But also, it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way because the pacing on this early section is so weird, and nobody was expecting to be playing as this person who can't do any of the cool things that they were teasing in the promo material.
Yeah.
So, like, on the one hand, it turned out to be a well-executed kind of bait and switch, and again, that's what they were going for, but it also left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth that then the rest of the game kind of exacerbated because for all of the things that I do remember liking about Assassin's Creed 3, it was also kind of a buggy mess.
I also just remember Hatham, the other side character. I remember him being more, at least from what I heard from all of my friends who played the game, he was a more interesting character than Connor ended up being.
He was a more interesting character than main storyline Connor.
Okay.
Assassin's Creed 3, I actually read a retrospective about it recently, and this prompted me to, like, remember my time playing it, and my time, not gonna lie, enjoying it for all of its flaws.
Yeah.
But this is another episode topic, but very quickly, like, Connor in the main storyline is very, like, brooding and kind of dull and not, like, a particularly interesting character. But there's a lot of side missions, and all of his side missions are, like, based around this desire he has to, like, make the world better than it is and make, like, his slice of the world a more livable place. And, like, you see a different and more interesting side of the character in a lot of the side content, which we've talked a little bit about in other episodes, but not this game specifically. So, but sometimes this kind of bait and switch, switcheroo, Freaky Friday in games gets a little weirder than just, like, now this is your new main character, or now this is the intro section where you play as Stuffy McBritish. One of my favorite examples of this, and it's like, it kind of counts, but it kind of doesn't. It's more of a, like, set piece moment, for lack of a better word, I guess. But in Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door, which is one of my favorite games that has ever existed, you have one of the sort of middle of the game chapters is all about you trying to stop this sorcerer who is turning people into pigs. And, you do the Paper Mario thing of exploring the world and figuring out where you need to go, and you have some fights, and you solve a couple puzzles, and then you get to a boss chamber, and it's pretty straightforward and pretty quick, and then you fight this boss who does not tell you his name. He's just sort of shows up as question marks in the battle menu, and he goes down, shockingly easily. You beat him, and you get the victory screen, and, the end of chapter thing happens, which in
everything's
Paper Mario,
happy.
Yeah, there's playing the triumphant music, and you get a text scroll of Mario and his friends defeated the new menace and found the crystal star, but who knows what next will find them next chapter in Paper Mario and the Thousand-Year Door. And the curtain closes, and then the curtain opens back up, and you watch as Mario and your party members leave the screen, leaving the body of the villain, who at this point has transformed into a shadow version of Mario, lying there. And you wait for a little bit and wait for the cutscene to end, and then you hit a button and Shadow Mario jumps up, and now you're controlling the body of the villain because he stole your fucking identity. And it's such
So good.
It's so good because
when you showed me that, I legitimately lost my shit. That was one of the coolest plot twists in any game I've ever played.
It's so good, and it's great because it's playing on, this is I want to say chapter 4 of this game. Mm-hmm. So you've had 4 times going through this sort of gameplay loop of get to new area, figure out what the problem is, fight enemies, solve puzzles, beat boss. Mm-hmm. And this portion of this gameplay loop is just long enough and just complex enough that it's basically saying oh yeah, this is just sort of a shortish middle game chapter.
Yeah.
And then you get to this moment, and it's oh, I just hit the halfway point.
Oh, we ain't out of it yet, fellas.
And so then there's a whole bit where you have to go around and you end up teaming up with a character who up to this point has been a villain because she doesn't know that you're Mario. And you have to solve some puzzles, and you have to figure out the guy's name, and it's a great chapter. And then, the chapter ends and you go back to being Mario, and all of your friends are like, "Oh my god, I can't believe that was you. I'm so sorry." It's been a while since a Snagglepuss adjacent voice came out.
I was about to say, I missed you.
But it's such a cool example of just it's a little off topic of what we're talking about, because it's not really asking you to suddenly you're a different character. But it is a very cool twist on the formula that they'd established, and it does kind of ask you to re-engage with how this game is putting itself together and figure out ways to get around. And all of the conversations you can have with people are very very different than when you're Mario and you're the superstar that everyone knows and everyone loves, and now you're just this nobody with no face and no voice.
Chris, if it makes you feel better, I have a example that is very similar to this. So
hit me. I'm excited.
Oh, okay. I'm going right into it?
Yeah. That's really all I had to say about Paper Mario. I wanted to give a shout out to one of my favorite games ever, but also that's just one of the coolest examples.
That's what we call a good set piece.
Yeah, it's a game that knows exactly how it works and knows exactly how you, the player, are going to understand that it works at that point, and is all right, cool, let me throw a wrench in that shit. I love it. Everyone go buy a GameCube, I guess, and play Paper Mario and the Thousand-Year Door.
Alright, so this next one is going to admittedly be a game I have not beaten. I'm halfway through it, and it's becoming a bit of a chore. But it's still a good game. It's just gotten to a point where I hit a wall and I can't progress. Chrono Cross for the PlayStation 1. The basic plot for Chrono Cross is in itself very atypical, and I wouldn't call it an unexpected perspective shift, but it's definitely not what you're expecting. The basic plot to Chrono Cross is that you are a boy, and you are in your seaside beach town, and you are collecting seashells with your girlfriend, when all of a sudden everything around you changes, and you learn that you are in an alternate universe where 10 years ago you died as a kid.
Oh, cool. That's relaxing.
It's very relaxing. You're very disoriented, and this isn't the perspective shift I was talking about, although I guess you could qualify that as its own perspective shift. But it's almost like that, that extended sequence in It's a Wonderful Life where it's this is what your life would be like if you were never born.
So you mean
Is
like
that-
the entirety of the If It's a Wonderful Life?
I thought that was only like the last half, because I think the first half is actually building up what his life is currently.
Yeah, no, it's the most memorable part. Anyway,
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, Chrono Cross is an RPG where you're exploring the world in an It's a Wonderful Life scenario in which you were never born. And ironically enough, the bulk of the world is better off for it.
well,
Chrono Cross is a weird game.
that's
It's
kind.
good. Like, I mean, some people are suffering, but like for the most part, like on the cosmic scheme of things, you get to a point where like, as you are trying to figure out why you're in this alternate universe and why there are people, like why there are knights that want you dead for some reason, you are constantly like running into this antagonist called Lynx. And Lynx is after the same MacGuffin you are.
The
or something
Triforce
like
of
that.
Power.
It's actually the Frozen Flame. Chrono Cross has such a weird plot, but anyway, I guess I'll jump right to it. You are after this MacGuffin, and so you get to the dungeon where it is housed, I believe. You know, you get into a boss fight with Lynx. Lynx being like an actual like demi-human, like Panther Man.
Good.
And and you fight him, and then all of a sudden there's an FMV, and you switch bodies with him, and Lynx is now inhabiting your body. You're a silent protagonist, so you know something's up when you see your character talking, and he has a menacing-looking face portrait.
Oh, good. That's
And
dope.
it's really cool, and you have to fight your party, and they beat the shit out of you because of course they do. Essentially, what happens is you end up, you get trounced, and you wake up, and a character who you had met previously, who was kind of like a third party. She basically is talking to you, and she's talking about like concepts of like identity and who you are, and like how people react to you, and it ties into the themes of the game in a really weird way. And unfortunately, because I haven't beaten the game, I can't speak about it in too much more detail. But I do think it's kind of this interesting. Your perspective is constantly switching. Like your given circumstances are being changed. Your appearance is being changed. Like your identity is this constant amorphous thing. If nothing else, I think that is something that Chrono Cross does that is really cool. I guess now, because I'm talking about Chrono Cross, I can segue into Chrono Trigger, which is a game that I have not beaten, but I've gotten to the final boss, so I feel like I have more liberty to talk about it.
There's less of the narrative that you haven't felt.
Yeah, exactly. I know how the game ends, because it is a game that came out in 1994, 5, something like that.
Chrono Trigger also like one of those games that everyone like frequently makes best game of all time lists.
Yeah, in Chrono Trigger rather, you are playing as Chrono, another silent protagonist, and like many RPGs with silent protagonists, especially they are your gateway to the world. You are them. Every accomplishment you do is supposed to feel like your accomplishment. So it's weird when you get to a certain point in like the end of the second act of the game, where you run into the final boss earlier than I think you expect, and there is a cutscene, and the final boss kills you. And I don't mean he kills you. I mean, like, you are in front of him and you disintegrate.
I feel
there's nothing of you
Mr.
left.
Stark, I feel weird.
Yeah, like exactly. It's
Holy
like
shit.
that straight up. And so you're kind of at this point where like there is no party leader, and you are just a confused mass of all of your teammates who are like, how do we bring Chrono back?
That's so weird. That's so cool.
And so like the next stretch of game is like just finding a way to resurrect your dead friend, like literally gathered the Dragon Balls and wish Goku back.
Oh my god.
It's crazy, and it's one of the coolest plot points of that game, and I feel a little bad for spoiling it, but the game is so old that like, and I feel like I'm the resident JRPG fan. So check out Chrono Trigger if you want. There's other plot twists in there, I promise.
Man. I love that.
It's a really cool moment.
Because one of those things that like you never expect to happen. Like this is common in RPGs as like, I guess there is the trope in RPGs of like the irreversible character death in cutscene, even though characters die all the time and you bring them back with like items.
Yeah.
The most famous example is Final Fantasy VII. Spoilers for a 20-year-old game, I guess.
Well,
or
I'm actually
25?
going to be talking about Final Fantasy VII anyway.
Oh, hell, well,
At
we
this
can use
point,
this
no,
as a segue.
22. It's 22.
Hop on my back as I segue down the wharf.
Down the
Final
wharf?
Fantasy, I don't know. Final Fantasy VII has the famous moment of your party member Aerith.
Who cares?
One of the two.
It is officially Aerith, but like I prefer Eris.
Anyway, she dies.
Cleaner.
She gets stabbed right through with a Masamune from the bad man Sephiroth, and all your Phoenix Downs aren't worth shit, sir, because she's dead, and the game says she's dead. So eat
Because
my butt.
she's dead.
Yeah. And obviously, you can hand wave that with like maybe they're just unconscious, and the Phoenix Down is like a smelling salt that brings them back or whatever. But like,
I think that's actually the in-universe.
I'm sure it is.
Justification, but anyway.
But like, there's things like that which are impactful, but also feel a little bit like, oh man, I thought I had this power to not have that happen. But then having that happen to the main character is wild. I love that.
It's really cool. I highly recommend Chrono Cross if you are if you are interested in playing any old school JRPG. I think more than anything I recommend Chrono Cross because it is a short game. It's like a 20-25 hour RPG, which I know sounds like a lot, but for like that genre, that is really quick.
Yeah, considering these are genres that you can frequently spend 80 to 100 hours on easily.
Exactly. So yeah, we were segueing into Final Fantasy VII.
You're on my back, Dad.
What?
Talk to me about Final Fantasy VII, my dude.
So, I guess briefly I will kind of talk about like how Final Fantasy's narrative and perspective has evolved since Final Fantasy IV. So Final Fantasy IV was like the first like really story, cutscene, character-driven Final Fantasy game. You could argue that it was 2, but 4 is a bit stronger in that case. And in 4, you are controlling a protagonist, and your perspective is always from that protagonist perspective. Even when the party splits up, you don't see what the other characters are doing. You are following that main character. Final Fantasy V has a party, and for the most part, like the party is always together. So you don't really have any perspective changes in that game. Final Fantasy VI, however, has no main character. Like, you could argue it's the first character that you control, but like, really though? So like it is an ensemble cast that like frequently and constantly changes perspective, and that's really cool. But 7 decides to go back to the singular main character. You are controlling Cloud Strife, ex-soldier, current mercenary, and big old dork. The entire game takes place from his perspective, and I guess maybe I should be careful about spoiling the game because now it's on Switch and people who've never played it before.
That's true.
Like, it's gotten a recent re-release, so I guess spoilers for Final Fantasy VII. Maybe, Chris, when you edit it, you can put like a timestamp on when we breeze past this.
Good call. Hello, this is Editor Chris coming to you from my palace unstuck in time. If you don't want spoilers for Final Fantasy VII, skip ahead to minute 30, second 17. That's 3017. And enjoy more of our vagary. Goodbye.
The cool thing about Final Fantasy VII is that, you are following Cloud's perspective. It is from his perspective for like the first disc and a half, I want to say. And then, after Aeris's death, you continue chasing Sephiroth because, you gotta get back at him because he's a dick. He basically starts putting seeds of doubt in your mind. He starts saying crazy shit like, you're not the real Cloud, and that you are actually a science experiment the same way Sephiroth was. And, Cloud gets more and more disoriented. Sephiroth actually shows Cloud a picture from his and Tifa's shared past that he remembers, but like then Tifa has to be like, actually, Cloud, I was there, you weren't. When you started talking about events that you should not have been there for, like it started freaking me out, and I didn't want to say anything, but like I feel like that needs to be addressed. And so eventually the game leads you to believe that Cloud is actually the result of a science experiment, and this kind of breaks his psyche entirely. And so in the last couple hours of gameplay, it has been shown that like Cloud has been subject to like mental suggestion by Sephiroth, in the same way that like I'm thinking of like one of the curses from Harry Potter, but I'm trying to think of something more universal. But anyway, yeah, no, Cloud has shown himself to be susceptible to mind control from Sephiroth, and this like breaks him completely. He gives Sephiroth the big bad MacGuffin that, you know, he should not have, and then he disappears from the game for roughly 5-6 hours of gameplay. And so from that point, you are controlling Tifa as she is looking for Cloud and also trying to evade the big bad Empire.
Honestly, that is one of my favorite things about, and I haven't played a ton of the modern Final Fantasy games. Dylan and I recently discovered that the 2 Final Fantasy games I've actually played a bunch of are 2 of the oldest ones.
1 and 3.
1 and 3. But what I love about what I've seen of like Final Fantasy 7 and Final Fantasy was 9 the one you were playing when you were up here?
Yeah.
Is the way they play with characters entering and leaving the party as a way of expanding on the story and creating new story beats.
Yeah.
The fact that they view the party not just as like, this is a gameplay thing, but also as like a tool for furthering the reality of what the progression of the story is very cool. And this is such a good example of that.
Mm-hmm. I think what is really cool about Final Fantasy VII in particular is that there are multiple moments, especially in the early game, where, you know, Cloud splits up from the other party members. But like in Final Fantasy IV, you only ever see his side of things. Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy IX, nice. They both like to switch perspectives a lot.
We did it. We got there. We're real podcasters now.
But, you know.
So dumb.
Like, Final Fantasy VI, very early in the game, there's a moment where the party splits up and you get to choose which party member you want to follow. And then once you get to the end of their segment, you choose the next character. And then that repeats like one more time. And Final Fantasy IX, basically from the first town, you switch perspectives like 2 or 3 times between like 3 characters. And so like they are very upfront about the idea that like there is not going to be a set perspective.
This is an ensemble.
Yes, but 7 kind of returns to that, like, this is the main character, you are that main character, and then they completely take that away from you halfway through the game. So yeah, that was always really cool. I'm gonna give the floor back to you, Chris, if you have anything. Actually, looking at the list, it looks like all of the rest of these are games I suggested.
It's true, they are. I couldn't come up with any others that I liked as much as Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, or I thought were as helpful or interesting to talk about as Assassin's Creed 3. So
yeah, I guess I'll just monopolize the rest of this podcast. Oh, good, 1 or 2 more. That means I don't have to talk about Phoenix Wright and spoil this series I want you to play. So, real quick, just gonna wrap this up real quick. Like, The Last of Us is a game that I've only played once, but like it did have a lasting effect on me. There's a really cool moment. So, to establish the plot of The Last of Us, it is basically a standard, not so standard zombie apocalypse type of story, where you are a grizzled old dude with kind of a cowboy aesthetic. Not aesthetic, but like there's a true grit feeling about you.
Yeah, he's definitely got the like man with no name ambiance to him.
Yeah, you are given a job. You need to escort this girl from where you are. You gotta travel west and get her to this hospital over there. And so most of the game, you're not really. It doesn't feel like an escort mission because thankfully the girl Ellie, her AI is very capable, and I also don't think she has a death state on her own. But like the flavor of the story is that you are helping her through this trip. And so, you know, you forbid her from using any weapons. You try to keep her out of combat for the most part. And then it gets to a point where you, the main character, you fall, you take a nasty fall, and I think you get impaled on a broken pipe.
Oof.
And the perspective shifts where, like, you know, you are able to get out of there. But like as you are leaving the building, you see Ellie, and she is, you know, she's shooting people, like she's doing what she needs to do to get you out of there. And then as you escape, you eventually collapse. The screen cuts to black, and then it's like 2 weeks or 2 months or however long, probably 2 weeks because I don't think you could last 2 months.
No,
in your
almost
state.
certainly not.
2 weeks later, or
Not
you
with
know
all those
what?
broccoli zombies wandering around.
It's true. There's a time jump. It's probably smaller than I'm thinking, but there is a time jump, and it is a cut to you are playing as Ellie, and you are hunting in the forest for food, and you are taking care of your old main character. You instantly realize the character I've been protecting is a lot more capable than I've been giving her credit for. And so like there's like I want to say 2 or 3, probably more. There's like a 5-hour segment where you are just playing as her, and like you run into marauders and you got to take care of them, and like Ellie has her own established antagonist that she needs to fight off, and you know eventually control switches back over to Joel, the main character, but you really get a better appreciation for how capable this character is that you've been protecting.
Yeah, it's a fun. It lets Ellie come into her own as more of a character, because like she already is. The game is The Last of Us is Cormac McCarthy's The Road, but with more of a plot and more broccoli zombies.
Yeah,
And by more of a plot, I mean like a driving purpose rather than just like we're going south because south is where we were told to go.
there's a lot of context. I guess for a little bit more context, she has immunity to whatever infection is causing the zombies. So like they're getting her to a facility where they can hopefully make a vaccine.
Yeah, and so the game is all about God, Last of Us is so good. It's about this relationship between these two people and how it grows. Like, if there is a core reason for the game to do all of the things it does, it's because that's the story they want to tell. They want to tell the story of, like, these two people and their relationship with one another.
And I think the coolest thing about The Last of Us is even when your perspective switches back to Joel makes certain decisions out by the end of the game that, like, Ellie makes her decisions, and Joel just kind of, like, walks those decisions back out of his own selfishness. And I feel like the most important thing is that, like, as the player, we kind of realize the agency Ellie has, and we realize she should be making these decisions for herself. And when we get control of Joel again, like, there's an alienation, you know, because I've heard a lot of people who take the side of Joel, and I've heard a lot of people who take the side of Ellie, but I think what's important is that, like, there's kind of this moment of, like, should I be doing what I'm doing? And it's really cool and it's really effective.
Yeah, it's one of the games that's frequently brought up when people are like, games are art, but like for good reason. Like, it does a lot of things very well, and it's one of the more thoughtful games. At least at the time, it was one of the more thoughtful games that had come out in a long time. Mm-hmm. At least as far as like narrative and character was concerned.
Yeah.
And I think that this shift in perspective and this allowing you to like now the escort mission is the character that you're playing as, and like now you have to think about who this person is, and it's very good.
Yeah. Last game I'm going to talk about, and then we can wrap this up. So Persona 3 is a pretty cool game. Persona 3 is also a bit of a weird game, but I think thematically Persona 3 is kind of about life and death and trying to make good of the time you have left, which is why Persona 3 has the calendar system. One of the things about Persona 3 is that, also, I guess I should say this up front, heavy spoilers for Persona 3. Also, Persona 3 is like a game where it's an old game, and I feel like a lot of people have already talked about it's not even really a plot twist, but just like Persona 3's ending. But if you haven't,
I don't know anything about it, so Dylan, educate me.
Okay, I wanted to warn the audience if they cared, because, you know, a lot of people are getting into the series with Persona 5, and they might go back and play Persona 3 having never been spoiled on it before. Anyway, sorry about that, just wanted to get that out of the way. I like how I'm spoiling some games and not others, but, like, you know, I feel like there are some games where it's like, alright, this is a pretty big plot twist. I don't think everyone's played this game. So, at the end of Persona 3, your main character dies. The whole like I was saying, the whole thing is like making good with the time you have left. When you fight the final boss, it's like this really cool when you get to the end, there's this really cool scripted moment against the final boss where you kind of have to do one last attack, and in the Persona games, you have attacks that cost your magic points, and then you also have attacks that cost your hit points, and this next attack that will finish the boss off will cost all of your HP.
Oh, good.
So you're like, all right, I guess I have to do this. So you do it, And
I love that because it makes you have to. Oh yes, good.
you have
Put
you
that
have to
choice in
pull
my
the trigger.
hands.
You have to pull the trigger.
That's so good.
And so there's the rest of your party has this quick scare where it's like, oh god, did he die? Is he dead? And then, you're fine. You come back, you're fine, and everything's okay. And you finish the rest of your school year. And on the last day of school, you're kind of chilling on the roof of the school with a battle android.
Good.
Don't worry about it. And, she's basically talking to you about how you taught her how precious life is and, all heartwarming stuff like that. And so the game kind of ends as you slip away. And then the credits song is this really nice, touching song about the android, being like, I will remember everything you've taught me. And it's really nice. And then you get to The Answer, which is the kind of bonus campaign in the special edition of Persona 3. You are playing as that android. And I don't know beat for beat the plot of this campaign, but you are playing as the android, and essentially you are in this dungeon where you are searching for something, and everyone has a different idea on what this is. And so, some of your party members think this can bring the protagonist back. So everyone's not entirely sure what the deal is, but what ends up happening is that your party kind of splinters off into teams. And they all fight each other because they all want different things out of this dungeon.
Well, shit, I love that.
And so you're watching the party kind of fall apart in the absence of what you've done. But more importantly, the android that you're playing as, she has inherited the power that the Persona 3 protagonist has to basically switch builds, personas. And so
the thing that the Persona main character
all Persona main characters, starting with 3, have this ability. And so, there's a couple characters who are like, well, why does she get it? And so it's just this very interesting perspective shift of from your perspective, the Persona 3 protagonist, you're like, those were a good group of friends, but it all just comes crashing down the second you leave, and you're playing a new protagonist, and you kind of have to build up everyone and kind of bring them together again.
I love this game. This is doing a lot of things that I love in that they're making the narrative mechanical. See, you have to devote to using all of your life to kill the boss.
Yeah.
But then they're also making the mechanics into something in the narrative where, they all notice that you suddenly have the main character power. I love that so much. That's so cool.
It's a really cool moment, and unfortunately I haven't actually gotten to this point in the game, but I know about it just because I've been a Persona fan since 2009. But yeah, I thought it was worth mentioning, definitely. And I know that someone who's played Persona 3, The Answer, is going to be like, you butchered that summary. And I'm like, I know, but what's important is that you are brought to a point where you have to fight your fellow party members because you all want something different.
Oh, that's so good.
So yeah, I think that's where we're going to cap it.
Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty... We've run the gamut of perspective shifts.
There's a cool thing that happens in Phoenix Wright that I don't want to talk about, so you're gonna have to get that Steam version when it comes out.
Tweet at CW Acting and yell at me until I play Phoenix Wright. But yeah, thank y'all for joining us on this kind of weirdly energized morning record. We had fun. We hope you did. As always, thank you for listening to Backstage Gaming. You can find us at our website, bsgpod.com, where you can also send us messages via contact form and find bios and info about me and Dylan. Or you can find our show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Stitcher, or on the Google Play Store. Please leave a review or a rating on any of those places and help us grow the brand.
My brand.
My eyes. My leg.
So yeah, no, if you want to tell us how fucking terrible we are, you can talk to us on Facebook, Twitter. Our handle is at BSG_cast. We have a YouTube, and if you like or hate what we talk about, you should use that hashtag BSGpod. Also,
please don't use it out of hate.
No, it's free publicity. Just use it regardless. Big ups to our friend Brendan French for the artwork he has provided us. If you dig what he is putting down, you can check out his Squarespace at brennanfrench.squarespace.com. That is BRENNEN-French.squarespace.com. You can also check out his Instagram at Instagram/BrennanFrenchArts. No hyphen there, just BRENNENFRENCHARTS.
And once again, as always, thank you to BioQuery, our friend and the super talented musician behind our theme song, Dot Sound Radio Volume 1 Instrumentality. You can check him out on Spotify or on his SoundCloud, which is soundcloud.com/BioQuery. Go give him a listen. Enjoy his most recent EP, Post-Human Angst, which is just full of slaps.
Okay, so I double-checked. We're doing plugs now, right?
Yes.
Okay, I double-checked and, well, regardless, you should still check out the Unexplored Places.
Yes, you should.
But I am still on it. I think I have a solid episode left, so you should go check that out. It's really good.
Yeah, and I will be on it sometime in the near future. Well, probably not the super near future because there's a while to go, but I'm going to be doing some stuff with them in their inter-season work. It's a super fun podcast, and you should go check that out.
Yeah.
Plus, enjoy Dylan's dulcet tones in an area where he has
swear
a script.
I sound better than this.
Well, not a script.
I don't have a script. What are you trying to say, Wilson?
This is a scripted actual play podcast. Also, check out Unwell, a Midwestern Gothic mystery. It is a ooky spooky, very good audio drama that is, at this point, I think 2 weeks away from my very small part in it at the very end. You'll get to hear me in a wildly unpleasant soundscape. There's also a new podcast coming out sometime in the future, don't worry about it, that I'm recording for, called The God's Head Incidental, which you should totally look up, follow them on social media. It's going to be super fun. We actually just wrapped my portion of it, recording-wise, last night, so it's going to be super cool. Be on the lookout for that. And I think that's it for us right now.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, wait. Nintendo main.
Oh, yes. We recently appeared on an episode. Thank you, Dylan.
I saved it.
We were guests on the most recent episode of the Nintendo Main podcast, a Nintendo news and opinion show. We met the guys who did it at the live show that we did here in Chicago a few weeks ago, and they asked us to be on their show, which we did, and was super fun. And we're thinking about having them on as guests here sometime in the hopefully not too distant future to talk about some shit that they know more about.
Fingers crossed.
And yeah. Check them out. They're on Twitter.
Hear Chris and I, sorry.
Yeah, they're on Twitter at Nintendo Main. So Nintendo Main.
If you want to hear Chris and I just shoot the shit and gush about video games we love from our past that we don't necessarily need to look at with a critical lens, you should listen to that episode. I had a lot of fun recording it.
And then check out the rest of the stuff they do. They recently launched a Patreon. They're good people. I think that'll actually do it for us. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Backstage Gaming, and we will talk to you again in a week. Bye-bye!
Hugs and kisses.